Let's talk a little NFL and specifically this idea of strength of schedule. Now, some folks might say, well, it doesn't really matter because you have 17 games and eventually you play good, bad, and ugly, and that's fine. But others have pointed out many times that who you play, where you've played them, at what point during the season you've played them, and something, Joe, you and I have talked about extensively, if the opponent you are playing is coming off of a bye week, all of those factors matter a great deal as far as the strength of schedule and what sort of record you are going to have at the end of the regular season. And sometimes knowing these things can be really helpful in terms of betting now, but also betting after the regular season in terms of your conference championship futures, your Super Bowl futures, things like that. Being able to put all of that in context is really important. So, Joe, what are some of your approaches when thinking about NFL strength of schedule?
Well, in the sports betting world, win totals have become very popular, but I've gone back and forth on this. Now, when I see in the background NFL Network, ESPN's on TV, and they put up the strength of schedule percentage, and what they're doing is they're going back to last year. It really bothers me. I get irrationally upset at it because it is idiotic. It's the league that we talk about again and again about how every year a team goes from worst to first, or a team will drop off and one quarterback injury changes everything. So strength of schedule based on the previous season's record, with every roster changing so much, I think it's completely idiotic. So in our space, a lot of people talk about win totals as being a smarter way to look at it. But even with win totals, and I hesitate to go too far to say, oh, well, the schedule this or the schedule that, because we all know for people that bet NFL win totals on a regular basis, what you should be doing for more value is betting alt win totals if you truly believe in something. Or, line it up. If instead of going, let's say, over 4.5, you'd go over 5.5, but also over 6.5 to get better value. Why? Because win totals are typically off, I'd say around half of them, by at least 2 wins. I mean, that's what history tells us. So I wonder if going by win totals is even worth something. So I'm really curious what you dug up, because strength of schedule, it still feels like it's a bit of a guessing game when we discuss it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think back to last season when we were, looking at all this stuff before the season started, and it seemed like the NFC East, for example, all had easier schedules, and then all these teams ended up being good, and you really didn't know, were all the teams in the division going to make the playoffs? So it's so hard to predict as well, even though you look like on paper, like, oh, the Saints and Falcons have easier schedules. Like, what if one of them surprises us and they're not as good as we think they are, or vice versa? I think also for me, you like looking at, the first 5 games of the season, or 4 to 5 games of the season, and how you think that could play out, and if maybe you should wait to find more value. If you think they're going to stumble out of the gate a little bit more, to look at a win total or a division bet, or if you think they're going to be the last undefeated team, maybe this is kind of the best value you're going to get for a while. But I kind of learned to wait and see a little bit. Sometimes I get a little too excited, like this point in the year where I start firing off all these bets.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
And then
because then you're like,
why did I
season started? Oh, I forgot I did that, and I forgot I had this coach of the year, that coach of the year, and this one too.
I get carried away. I'm like, this seems great in May, and then I'm like, why did I do that? So I've definitely learned personally to pump the brakes a little bit.
Well, the numbers are less sharp now than they are in August and September. And so there is something useful as far as having that approach. Now, if you're betting too much, yeah, it's a different story. But definitely your least efficient numbers are going to be in the here and now. Joe, you were talking about looking at win totals, and I agree with you that that's a better approach than looking at 2022 records. In large part, I mean, think about using records from last year. How many times have we seen a team go on a tear because they played a lot of backup quarterbacks, or they have a lot of home games, or a lot of teams have just fallen apart? Maybe they're quote unquote tanking or whatever. Sometimes you get really fortunate with those kinds of things. And so the record itself is flawed, even when you're looking at 2022 data. and then you're adding another year to it, yeah, it's a horrible approach. Win totals are better, I agree. But here's the problem with win totals. What's baked into a win total? The strength of schedule. So you're saying, okay, I want to get strength of schedule by comparing strength of schedule. So basically you're double counting, so to speak. So that's a little problematic. Not as bad as 2022 records, but still problematic in terms of filtering that out. Because what we want to do in this exercise is say, okay, what is an NFL team's strength of schedule in the here and now? So what I did was I looked at ELO ratings from 538, and I just wanted to look at how good these teams are without strength of schedule. Just look at their overall quality. And I made a few adjustments, some manual adjustments in terms of quarterback changes that we know about, quarterback changes that we are anticipating. And obviously, this is a work in progress. 538 will have more accurate numbers than they do right now. But I gave my own quarterback adjustments, and then I applied them as power rankings to see how different the schedules are compared with what was perceived from last year. So I said, okay, let's look at what these ELO ratings are suggesting will be 2023's win-loss record, compare it to what 2022's strength of schedule win record looks like, and then I came up with the 5 teams that have tougher schedules than we are anticipating, and the 5 teams that have easier schedules than we are anticipating. So as far as the 5 teams that do have it tougher than we are led to believe, it all starts with the Cleveland Browns. They will have a tougher go of things than I think we're talking about. They have an early bye week. The AFC North could be mighty, mighty tough. They get the 49ers. They get the Jets. The Texans may be tougher than expected because that defense will be a good bit better. You've got a new quarterback there in C.J. Stroud who probably knows what he's doing. I'm not saying the Texans can win the AFC South, but they should be a good bit better. And so if you have, say, a last place or a third to last place schedule or something, then you could very well be facing teams that have gotten a lot better immediately. One thing that I noticed, too, as far as this list is concerned, is that if you have a pretty light schedule and now all of a sudden you're facing the Jets, well, the Jets have Aaron Rodgers now. They're way, way better than they were. And so that's a tough break. But the Browns have it tougher than expected. The Falcons actually have it tougher than expected. They have to face Jacksonville and London. Let's not forget that. The Steelers have to start with the 49ers, and then they have some tough games. The Saints and the Vikings. So the 5 teams that have a tougher strength of schedule than we're talking about: Browns, Falcons, Steelers, Saints, Vikings. What stands out there to you, Joe?
Man, a lot in the same division. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings are a team that everybody will be fading this year, but I wonder how far people are going to go. So in the sports betting space, they will. And then I think your average Joe fan is going to be like, their record was awesome. Nobody else is good. Everybody else got worse in the NFC North. Okay, the Bears are a little bit better. I don't believe in the Lions. So I wonder what the market ends up doing with the Vikings. But those are a couple of things that end up popping. And also, a team like the Vikings, 2 of the last 3 games, they play on Christmas Eve and January 7th against Detroit. That is likely to be deciding. That's your first and second favorites in that NFC North. So those are a couple of things that pop.
What stood out to me was I think the Falcons do have a tougher schedule. Like, I could agree with that, especially out of the gate. You've got Carolina. Of course, they've got a new quarterback, but nobody really knows what that's going to look like. Green Bay might not be as bad as Joe's been talking about as people think. A lot of people are high on the Lions. Then you've got the Jags. Houston should be improved. Commanders are always weird. You never know what you're going to get there either. It's just, they really could end up stumbling out of the gate for what a lot of people think is an easy schedule, one of the easiest schedules in the whole league, and it might not be.
Exactly. As far as the 5 teams that have it easier than expected, this one surprised me a little bit, but the Giants probably have it easier than expected. Here is a team that in the NFC East, we talk a lot about the Eagles, and we'll still talk a lot about the Cowboys. They are still in pretty good shape, but the Giants are real up-and-comers. So that's going to be an interesting one. Chargers have it easier than expected. The Patriots was interesting because I sort of went counter to what a lot of folks have said. Even smart folks who say ESPN Analytics, who say that the Patriots have the toughest schedule in the NFL. Well, this process says, well, actually, the Patriots may have it a little bit easier than anticipated. And then to round out the top 5 here, Broncos and Bears. So it's Giants, Chargers, Patriots, Broncos, Bears with easier paths than expected, Joe.
It's scary because those are a couple of teams that I do like. I do expect to take some significant jumps, and so the league is helping them out a little bit. So it makes me feel stronger about my feelings. I don't know that I'll be able to go and back the Bears, but because their win total is 7.5, going from the worst team in the league up to 7.5. But I've been on record with teams like Denver that I expect them to make a big jump. The Denver one is so interesting because where do we land on them? A year ago, they had 5 wins, but a year ago, without Sean Payton, their win total going into the season was 9.5 after all the Russell Wilson buzz. So what is the true Broncos team? Are they the win total of 9.5? Are they closer to the 5-12 record from a year ago, or right there down the middle?
What stood out to me is how disappointed I am that the Patriots made that list. The Patriots are cheating again and breaking rules, and they might have an easier schedule than expected. Boo! Is all I have to say to that.